Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Pomay.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 8, Episode 1, overall 386 of Live with CDP Sports Talk, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, or give them a call at 519-824-0210, or email them at info@barrycullen.com. I hope everyone's doing well on this Thursday, April 4th, 2024, and I'm looking forward to my guest tonight. I will bring him on in a minute, but as always, Live with CDP Sports Talk is on weeknights from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. on radio station CKRT, Border City Radio in Windsor, Ontario, playing the best soft rock music of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I'm also on WQEE 99.1 FM, weeknights from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. I hope everyone's doing well on this Thursday, April 4th, 2024. I just saw my Detroit Tigers lose their first game of the year tonight, 2-1 to the New York Mets. Their first loss of the year. They were up 1-0 in the ninth inning, but unfortunately their bullpen couldn't hold the lead. First time this season their bullpen didn't get the job done, but the Tigers start the season at 5-1 after 6 road games, and now the Tigers head home to Comerica Park on Friday afternoon to take on those Oakland A's at Comerica Park in the Detroit Tigers home opener there as well. I'm looking forward to my guest tonight. My guest's name is Nick Small. He's a friend of mine. He's also the co-host of our Argo Bounce live audio show during the CFL and Toronto Argonauts season. And Nick is also a longtime Toronto Argonauts season ticket holder and a huge fan of curling. And if you want to know anything about the game of curling, Nick's your man. And I'm going to bring on my co-host Nick Small now, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Toronto Argonauts from last year going into this year, and the CFL Combine and the upcoming CFL Draft, which I believe is on Tuesday, April 30th at 8 o'clock. Good evening, Nick. How you doing?
Hey, Chris. Glad to be back here. Glad to see you, listen to all our fellow Toronto Argonauts and CFL football fans. Been a very long off season. I'm glad the curling season's coming down to an end because it means that we finally get to start talking football again. It's my career is revolved around the curling industry, so as things kind of start to die down here, the football season ramps up. It's the perfect opportunity to talk a little bit about like you said, the upcoming draft, how the Argonauts are looking, what additions they might make. It's always a really exciting time of year because by this point, it's been 4 months. We've kind of forgotten about how the season went last year, and we're looking forward to new life, just like springtime.
Hey, before we get into the Argonauts and the CFL, just tell us about your trip to Regina, Saskatchewan for your workplace, and how did that go?
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. So for those who don't know, I work as the warehousing team lead for Goldline Curling, which is one of the major curling sponsors. We have a couple of competitive teams, like on the women's side, Rachel Holman and Jennifer Jones are some of them. And then we're also the main merchandising sponsor for Curling Canada starting this year. So all the jerseys that the teams were wearing in the Scotties and the Brier, and any of the fan merchandise that you could buy, that's all delivered through our company. So I had the opportunity through work to be able to attend the Brier in Regina, Saskatchewan, and it was an extremely fun experience. There were a lot of busy days, but it was really cool getting to engage with fans, seeing the ride, visiting the rider store, and pun intended, being a little green with envy over the sheer merchandise, the diversity of it, some really cool stuff you could get that you definitely can't get with Argo's logos here through our suppliers. So it was really fun, and the Mosaic Stadium was wild to see in person. You have a sheer appreciation for how much the riders mean to that city. And also the curling itself was just fantastic. Some of the best in the world competing. A fantastic final between Mike McEwen and Brad Gushu, and it capped off a really exciting year in Canadian curling.
How many days were you down there, and was that your first time to Regina, Saskatchewan?
So yeah, it was my first time into Saskatchewan. I was actually supposed to leave on the Sunday afternoon, but there was a really bad snowstorm in Regina that ended up grounding us for about 24 hours. So I left the following Monday night, and then I was there. Landed at like 1 a.m. Regina time, and then I was there up until the following Monday, just after the finals took place.
Did you see any AJ Ouellette Saskatchewan Rough Rider jerseys while you were down there?
Oh yeah, in the I don't think I saw any at the arena, but I definitely saw the mannequin with the AJ Ouellette jersey and the chain and the sunglasses and the backwards ball cap and all that. So and I spoke to a couple of individuals in the store there, and they were talking about how both how AJ Ouellette and Corey Mace were so engaged with the city and the community, and they're already, just by signing there, they're already bringing a tremendous amount of change to the culture there. It's really great to see, after a couple of difficult years for Riders Nation, that they've got some new life and some new energy. A strong Riders team is good for the CFL, even especially with the struggles that they've had the last couple of seasons.
Hey Nick, I don't know a lot about curling. I know Don Landry and yourself. How much has the game of curling grown in the last few years? And do you find more and more people from other countries are into curling too, besides Canada?
Well, on the international side, absolutely. I think one of the best examples you can look back about 8 years ago was the Korea Olympics, when the Schuster American team ended up winning, because following that gold medal that they won, in America especially, curling's popularity exploded, and more clubs started popping up in like California and in other parts. Like there's one in Nashville. And the culture in the U.S. is quite a bit different than like here in Canada, where there's a lot of small town local clubs, and then there's competitive leagues and things like that. But the club's a big part of the community. It's a very different kind of social thing in the U.S., where like the one in Nashville, I believe, you can go bowling, and it's like a co-bowling curling facility, which 10 years ago even you would never believe. So that the whole culture just in the US has exploded, and we see just in international play how much more competitive the teams are. It used to be not that long ago where it was like Canada, Sweden, Norway, and then maybe one or two other teams that were okay, and then nobody else even came close to competing with them. And now, like, Italy's one of the top teams in the world. Germany's played extremely well in this year's World Men's Championship that's on right now. We've seen Korea finish second to Rachel Homan at the Worlds. So it's become a much more global sport than we've ever seen. And you can argue that, it's maybe not as fun for Canadians to see that the Canadian teams don't win gold medals every year like it's expected anymore. But in the same way, given how quickly and how hard the international community has worked to catch up and surpass Canada, but it still also highlights the challenges we see in Canada, where you look at half the field that went to the Brier, at least, if not all of them, and any of those Brier teams could have been a world's worthy team, even if they don't necessarily win every game or finish in the medals. All of them would have given any of the other international teams a run for their money.
Who are some of the top Canadian curlers, and do you find more and more women are into curling now too? And do you find like how it's changed the last couple of years?
To be honest, I'm not sure about the gender ratio, if it's really changed a lot, because curling's been one of these sports for a very long, where there's the women's tournament and then the men's tournament, the Briar. And in a lot of ways, the Scotty's been almost more recognized of an event because of the fact that they've had that consistent sponsorship with Scotty's and Kruger products for the last 40 years now. Whereas the Briar's kind of changed hands. It was um, uh, cigarette company, and then Labatt's, and then Tim Hortons, and now Montana's is the title sponsor. So you see that but it still has the gravity of being the Briar and as the national men's championship, because they go so well hand in hand, where it's the Scotties and then the Briar right after. It's always felt like it's been a very good kind of gender parity sport where the popularity is the same. That being said, there's always still lots of initiatives to getting more women and girls, especially, into sport. And even where I am in Oakville, we're extremely lucky because we have some of the most talented female instructors in all of Canada. And offer leagues to young girls to play at Mississauga or at Oakville, to compete and be instructed just by women, it helps reinforce that ability, seeing on TV the way teams like Rachel Holman, Carrie Einerson, and Jennifer Jones all play, just as some examples that there's the instruction, the ability to emulate that and be the next potential top tier curling team.
When you're in Regina, what was your favorite drink and food that you had there? Did you have something the locals love down there?
Yeah, well, that's tough to answer, because, to be honest, every restaurant we went to or place we ate at, the food was phenomenal. I think the two that I went to in particular, we went to Rebellion Brewery, which was like they had a lot of Mexican themed food, but they also had an on-site brew house, and all their beers were fantastic. We took a couple of them home. They had a Kolsch style pilsner that we took a 2-4 home to us in the Airbnb. Those beers were amazing. The tacos were fantastic. We were at another place called Pile of Bones, which was really cool. They actually had all of their draft beers on like a TV, and it would tell you if what was a freshly tapped keg, what's kind of near the end that they were maybe trying to offer cheaper at a discount to get rid of. And then the third place we went to right after we finished kind of packing up everything was Leo's Tavern. And it was like a really cool kind of psychedelic place. You go into there and there's photos and there's knickknacks like thing all over the walls. There were albums and there was a conquistador Mexican wrestler luchador mask with the riders, and there was I can't describe it. It was just phenomenal. And like I said, there was not a bad food or drink I had there, and all the locals there were really nice. We had some absolutely incredible volunteers working with us, and it made the whole experience a lot of fun and really rewarding, to be out there and sort of sharing that passion with other individuals who you've maybe talked to through emails, through work, through your company, but then actually getting to meet them in person and work with them was a really fantastic experience.
How was the weather while you were there?
A tad chilly. It was only, I think, -25 when I got there, so yeah, a little cold. But as the event went on, it gradually got warmer. Because I missed the snowstorm, I was lucky enough that I didn't get the -35 day, and you don't really realize in Ontario how bad it is when there's no humidity. Because if I was outside for more than 10 minutes, my nostrils would be filled with chunks of snow and frost. So you don't really realize that how much you make a difference out west. Fortunately, it didn't have a tremendous impact on the curling. There was a moment in the game actually though where the snow, or because of difference outside, some condensation actually built off one part of the roof and started dripping down, but a smartly placed bucket fixed that.
And before we get into the Argos, for those that are watching that don't know much about curling or if they're interested in it, what would you tell them about the game of curling?
Um, well, if you're looking to get interested, I would say look at the Curling Canada and the OCA website, and even just go to a Google search and check out your local club, because I guarantee you, if you live, whether you live in a bigger part like in Toronto or you live in a smaller municipality, you probably have a curling club within half an hour of, and like that's what's really cool about curling in Canada. And once you realize that, like before I started curling, I had no idea there was a dozen clubs in the Hamilton and Toronto area where I am, and I've been fortunate to have curled at pretty much every single one of them. So I mean, if your clubs are always looking for new members, it's a really affordable sport. If you have $500, you can get top of the line equipment. Even $200 can give you a good decent pair of shoes and a broom, and so it's a really affordable sport. And yeah, I would say just take a look and see where your local club is and give it a try. Clubs always have learner curls, and there's always some less competitive leagues. And if you do start to want to develop those skills, there's always competitive leagues to join. There's always there's lots of coaching clinics that are held across Ontario and across Canada. So the first thing to do is throw your first stone, and once you start playing, you'll love it.
Okay, now we're going to go to the gridiron, and Nick, just wanted quick thoughts, just quick overall thoughts on the 2023 Toronto Argonauts season. It was their 150th season. They set a record with 16-2. Unfortunately, it didn't lead to playoff success, but just quick thoughts on last year's season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right in that it does still seem a little bit hollow looking back on it. I mean, because you don't win the Grey Cup, you don't really think about the success of a 16-2 season, which is kind of crazy to say because of how dominant they were. Excuse me, because of how dominant they were in the majority of those games. But yeah, it really, what I think when you look back on it and you see this year's team coming in, much the lineup has turned over, whereas the year before it didn't really. And that usually never happens when you have a team that's won a Grey Cup. Usually that's when everybody kind of tries to pick apart your players. But last year everybody really bought in for another year around, and you saw that success with how dominant they were throughout the season. The energy was high. They were extremely productive on both sides of the ball. There were very few games where their opponents were within even 10 points of them. And it gave the opportunity for kind of everybody to have a hand in. It wasn't like the year they won the Grey Cup, they had a ton of injuries, and they weren't really that injured last season for the most part. And it allowed everybody to kind of rotate in. And the fact that the ability that could step in for anybody at any point in the middle of a game help drive things to be as successful as it was. So I think, we're still going to dwell a little bit on not winning the Grey Cup for another year through this season. But at the end of the day, they have a lot of things to be proud of in the successful season they had.
We got a viewer here, Ty. Boye, blessings on you and Chris and Nick. Go Argos. Hey, I can't wait to see you, and I'm looking forward to seeing your son Daniel in the backfield this year for the Argonauts. And obviously with the loss of AJ and the retirement of Andrew Harris, Daniel should get more playing time this year and get his big opportunity, Nick. And just thoughts on that.
Yep, shout out Ty, Argo boy. Hello to you and everybody else in your family, and shout out to Daniel. I absolutely agree, Chris. This is a huge opportunity for him to step up. You also saw early offseason they made the addition to Kadeem Carey, but I think if you were kind of looking at it on paper, it sure seems like Carey might kind of fit in Harris role, and Argo boy is probably going to take up the mantle as the big bulk guy. And I think if what we've seen from Daniel's play last season, he's going to step in really well into that blocking running back role, which in Canadian football is so completely critical to success out on the field.
Quick thoughts on Andrew Harris's time with the Argonauts and how much he meant to the CFL and his time with the Argonauts. And AJ Ouellette, his impact with the team as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about Andrew Harris, I think his success with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers still comes first a little bit, but I think because of some of the injuries he had with Toronto, it I don't think it necessarily had a blip on his career. I mean, he's going to go down in history as one of the best running backs. I think of him and I think of John Cornish as kind of the two quintessential Canadian run that have defined the league over the last 15 seasons or so. And then, I mean, you look at Oliveira now in Winnipeg now in kind of the same sort of legacy. So you see that in how it's really reinforced the idea that you can have a strong Canadian running back, because it wasn't that long ago where almost all of the running backs were American imports. So I think it's given a lot of confidence in the quality of talent that we're bringing in from Canadian players. And then AJ Ouellette, I think when I think of him, I think of the energy and the excitement he brings, his ability to really connect with people, and I kind of alluded to that in Saskatchewan, the Thor, the hammer. They did sell those hammers in Saskatchewan in their store, by the way. So he brings that charisma and that energy. Absolutely amazing individual, and I think he's going to become a fan favorite in Saskatchewan as well. I don't know if they have a Greek town in Saskatchewan to go wrestling though, so I think he might miss that a little bit leaving Toronto. But he's definitely going to be one of these people who are so community engaged, and I think it's going to be really good for the city of Saskatchewan.
Yeah, I'll be honest.
Or city of Regina, excuse me.
When the Argos did lose a lot of their free agents, as a season ticket holder, as a fan, I was disappointed because we were starting to get used to these guys and they could market it. But I also understand the Canadian Football League, just like any other pro sports league, is completely a business. And like I said, I wish they could have kept AJ Ouellette, but Daniel Oboye gets his opportunity, and as long as Mike Pinball Clements is with the Toronto Argonauts, they will always be competitive and they'll be in the hunt for a Grey Cup again this year. It's just going to be a little bit different team this year, maybe a little more of a different identity than last year's team.
Yeah, you sure hope so. But I mean, this is the thing I find that's weird with the CFL, because get that you lose Ouellette, you lose a really popular guy. But when you look at it, there really isn't that much of the sort of core guys that have really changed. Like, yeah, you lost Ouellette, but really strong running back in Attaboy to fill in for him. You lost Pickett, but you still managed to re-sign Wyndham McManus. And then you lost Boris Beatty, but you managed to re-sign Lirim Hawrylahku, who isn't necessarily as a power kicker as Beatty is, but he's arguably maybe a little bit more consistent in terms of accuracy, like on especially with the medium range field goals. But so those guys, and there really isn't a whole lot that's changed. I guess you Giddens trade as well, but Curly Giddens didn't play much last season, and they still and they still managed to get a 16-2 record without him. What really is the key to the Argonauts that are going to make them still a force to be reckoned with next season? They have pretty much the exact same offensive line, and they have a ton of the same defensive linemen. So they're gonna have the same pressure on both sides of the lines, and that's where you win battles in most football games, through the trench, blocking, and by good defensive line play, being able to penetrate against the opponent's offensive line. And I mean, the one that I guess stands out there then is by trading Curly Giddens, you pick up Jake Serezna, who fills a hole that they might have left with a couple of people moving down the road to Hamilton. So now you've got Serezna, you've got Knight, you've got Brett Oakman, you've got Rimolade, and you've got Robbie Smith. So you still have a ton of your core guys now on the D line to be able to put pressure like we saw last season.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Of all the free agents they left, which one will be maybe the most difficult to replace? And thoughts on Curly Gittins' Jr.'s time with the Toronto Argonauts?
Yeah, I'll start with the first part to talk about the hardest position to replace. I think Darius Pickett would actually be to replace. That sort of, I brought it up before, we're trying to call that wide side linebacker. You're almost like a defensive back, flying wing type position. I find that to be a very it requires a very particular skill set because of your ability. You've got to be quick like a DB, but you also have to have strength like a linebacker. Maybe not so much like the same pure strength as like Enoch Mwamba as a middle linebacker, but you need to have a lot of flexibility to be able play both the running game on sweeps and reverses, but also having the ability to cover the passing game. The other thing too with how it impacts, you're going to see a lot of different defensive schemes as well this year. So the way Corey Mace had coached it last year as defensive coordinator in Toronto is going to be very different now that you've got kind of a by committee coaching system in Toronto this year, where you kind of have one guy focusing more on the line and the linebackers and the run coverage, and you have another focusing on the DBs and the pass coverage. So I don't think you'll necessarily see the same kind of interchangeability, the kind of blitz packages, the ability that Pickett had just to be able to fake one side of the field and end up on the complete opposite and just screwing with opposing quarterbacks' heads. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a little bit more simplistic this year if I had to put my guesses. But that's not to say they're not going to find ways to apply pressure and move guys in and out. And then Curly Gittins, it's hard to say. I mean, I was a fan of him, and I always will be because of our Wilfrid Laurier University, and I think he's going to do extremely well in Edmonton, being reunited with McLeod Bethel Thompson. I found that he didn't quite click as well with Chad Kelly when he did play, and I don't know if that's just because Chad was on the second string lineup, whereas Curly was on the first string playing with McLeod the year before. And with the injury, it's kind of a small sample size, but I think it was in the end a pretty smart move to trade Gittins for Serezna. You pick up a key defensive lineman, and I think it helps Curly get a bit of playing time out in Edmonton, where they could really use him.
Quick thoughts on the loss of Javon Leake to the Edmonton Elks and how much of an impact he was with the Argonaut special teams.
Yeah, there's another individual definitely who could have fit in with some of the others I mentioned as a potential guy. It's tricky because we've seen how the special teams, the return game, has sometimes turned its head. I think Leake will continue to be a returner out in Edmonton, given that he gets the kind of blocking on special teams that he needs. It's easy to get a ton of credit on the returner for a good return, but when you watch the replays, I'm looking more at how the blocking sets itself up to provide the runner with that hole to be able to break a 30-40 plus yard return. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he is in those first couple of games. And the other thing to kind of think about is talk in the CFL about potential changes to special teams, like we've seen in the NFL, some kickoff adjustments and stuff. So if they do change how it's done, it might end up mitigating the impact of the return game. But it's the return spot for Toronto's case is, we've seen success with some guys. We've seen it with others. I look at how they retained Deontay McMahon. So my first thought is he's probably going to be the guy to replace Javon Leake. He did it a little last season. So it's definitely BJ Bird could potentially be a candidate as well. I don't know about his brother, I believe, Jordan Bird. Maybe there's potential there. So there's people who can fill that position. So that'll be one of the questions at training camp to see who they decide to go with. And I think in those preseason games, we're going to see a lot of guys get reps in those positions.
And thoughts on the loss of Corey Mace to Saskatchewan, and what kind of an impact he had on the Argonauts, and what kind of a head coach do you think he'll make with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in 2024?
Well, he's definitely going to be a fantastic head coach. He has qualities that make a good CFL coach, and someone more importantly that you want to play for and put your heart and soul in. Ever since his first interview with Saskatchewan, he's came out as one of these guys who you'll absolutely want to run through walls for, and especially for a team like Saskatchewan, where as I mentioned, like Winnipeg fans might not like me saying it, but it's like the team that is the definition of the CFL, if I had to pick one, would be the Riders, the whole Rider Nation, Rider Pride aspect. It's the one everybody thinks of when the CFL gets mentioned first. And even though they haven't had the kind of success that you would think a franchise like that would have, Corey Mace, I think, is the guy who will absolutely be results driven. And we saw once he came into Toronto, it just completely turned the way the defense played on its head, and such an intelligent football quarterback that he'll know how to use every tool he's got and to leave offenses totally confused with how they're defending in certain situations. So and I mean, when you look at how the whole last two seasons have went with him in Toronto, I don't think there was a single game where you would really blame the defense for costing a game. They were steadfast through the entire year. They bend but never broke at any circumstance. At East Final last year, when Toronto lost, like you can't blame it on the defense, and that's the thing that's going to be forgotten from that game. The defense sacked Fajardo, I think, 4 times, and or actually more than that. I think it was 5 or 6, but. Anyway, they played out, kept Toronto in that game until the bitter end, and it was the offense that fell apart. So I think he is going to be a phenomenal head coach in Saskatchewan. And I mean, I forget who it was that said it, but I think it was Jim Barker maybe. But someone said being the coach of the Saskatchewan Roughriders is the best job in the world until you lose. But I don't think we're going to see that in Saskatchewan. I think they've got one of the best in the CFL at head coach now, and someone who's very deserving of the position.
Nick, I'm trying to remember here. Who did the Argos name to replace Corey Mace as defensive coordinator?
It was they never named one. It's, as far as I know, it's still by committee. Okay. Their DB's coach or their defensive back coach, in blanking here, but yeah, I know they're doing it sort of by committee this year, at least for now. If things don't go well, I could see them changing it. But yeah, they don't have an official dedicated defensive coordinator. I think it's between Kevin Iben, the linebackers coach, and I'm not sure whether it's William Fields, their secondary coach, or Demetrius Maxey, their D-line coach, who will be the other defensive kind of co-coordinator.
Okay, that'll be interesting. I will end up when they come here to training camp here in Guelph, I will have to ask some of the Argonauts about that and see what they think about that as well. And I don't want to go over this too long with this next question, but just a quick assessment of that East Final loss to Montreal at home against a very good, very hot Alouettes team. And do you think the Argonauts might have come into that game a little too overconfident, being 16-2 and not losing a home game for almost a year and a half?
I mean, again, I think it's hard with hindsight and having a year after 4 months now, but yeah, there maybe was a little bit of overconfidence coming into it. I think, well, I know last when it happened, I sort of I personally undermined Montreal's play, just because of the lack of execution on Toronto's part. You tend to look at it and us making mistakes, not executing our game, than it was them capitalizing on theirs. Um, I still think there was a lot of moments where they forced plays where they really, take what you've got. Um, just if you throw it away, you have another chance to fight. Where you turn the ball over, it puts you in an even worse position. Or, like, they could have played the long game over field positioning. I think, especially with the way their own defense played, they kept them. Like I said before, they kept them in the game for at least the good 3 quarters before it kind of really started to fall apart. But I think looking at it more, you do have to give a lot of credit to the secondary in Montreal, and you saw that too in the Grey Cup game against Winnipeg. They were able to take advantage of opportunities, generate turnovers when they needed to, and really breathe life into the offense when it was at times struggling for the Montreal offense.
Montreal's going to find out what Toronto did last year. Is it's harder to stay at the top of the mountain as a champion instead of being the hunted. And now the Alouettes are not going to come into this season as the underdog. Alouettes, look at us, we're underdogs. Now they're going to have to play the role of being the favorites, and they're going to find out how much more difficult it is being a champion and remaining a champion than it is hunting for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that I find tricky with looking at Montreal, I don't look at as in depth as Toronto, keep in mind, but it really doesn't seem to me like that Montreal has done a whole lot with its lineup since winning the Grey Cup in terms of any major additions or losses for that matter. Like I look at Toronto and there's quite a few changes, whereas Montreal has at least for now seemed kind of stagnant, which might not necessarily be a bad thing because we kept our team pretty much together after winning the cup and we had the season we had. But I don't know. There's something about the way the regular season went for Montreal that it was more of a kind of a just make it in the playoffs and then you can go that extra mile once the playoffs start, that you didn't see in Toronto where they were kind of full gun from the beginning. I don't quite see that to the same extent from Montreal, but I could be wrong, and that's part of the thing. What is going to end up happening. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out.
The Alouettes did lose their key running back, William Stanback, to the BC Lions, and I think that's an outstanding move for the BC Lions, and I think that makes BC even more of a contender in the West with the addition of William Stanback. But I'll be honest with you, Nick, I do think the CFL Eastern Division next year is going to be even more competitive and stronger than it was last year or even the year before. I think Hamilton's gotten better. I think Ottawa has improved, and Montreal being the Grey Cup champs, you got to put them in there too, along with the Argonauts.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hamilton right now looks better on the defensive side of the ball, with a couple of notable Argonaut additions, might I add. Montreal, it's tricky to evaluate. I think they'd be kind of similar. Yeah, definitely. I mean, within the divisional games, everybody's going to want a piece of them now and play that extra bit now that they're playing the defending champs. Losing Stanback, yeah, is a bit of a key loss, but he also didn't really have the kind of breakout season like he did 3 seasons ago. Like he was good, but he wasn't that kind of great level like we saw 3 seasons ago. And then Ottawa is the one I'm really intrigued by because they've made a lot of moves, and like Pickett, like I aforementioned earlier, him going to Ottawa, I could see Ottawa turning the table around a little bit. I'm just kind of browsing through the lineups right now to receive some of the major changes, but yeah, I think Ottawa has a lot of potential to do better this year.
And getting Drew Brown, I think, is huge because I think Winnipeg would have loved to kept him, but obviously with Colaros. So I think Drew Brown, if he's as good as advertised, I think that's going to help them a lot as well. I'm not even sure about Jeremiah Immozoli, if he's even coming back next year or he's retired. I'm not sure about his status right now.
Yeah, well, he's still under contract for this season, but yeah, I mean, with the way that sort of heartbreaking way that his injury, he re-injured himself coming too soon, arguably. I don't think it's really hard to speculate, and I don't really want to. But yeah, it's hard to see him coming back and playing at the level he did before he was injured. Uh, I mean, I pulled for Crum quite a bit because he played well in the preseason game against the Argos, and I knew he had potential. But it is hard when you're not with quite the competitive level of a team as Ottawa was last year. But I think there is a bit more potential with Drew Brown now coming in, someone who has a little bit more experience and performed a bit better. But keep in mind, he was also playing with the Winnipeg, so I think it is going to be a lot different coming into Ottawa. But they still have a lot of good weapons at wide receiver. Just looking at now, guys like Jalen Eklund, Brandon Addison. So there's guys there that hopefully can find some chemistry with. But I think they could use maybe another wide receiver or kind of a potentially like another running back, tight end kind of guy. Yeah, we'll see.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Nick. In free agency so far, which CFL team you think has been the biggest winner or the most improved, and which team you think got hit the hardest? Obviously, the Argos did, but the Argonauts also have a lot of depth on their roster as well. And I think the Argonauts, even with their losses, their depths, I think, will be tested this year, but I think they'll be okay. But just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, if I had to play winners and losers, Argonauts, yeah, are slightly loser, but I don't think they're as bad as people are making them out to be. I think they're not going to be 16-2 again, but I think they'll definitely they definitely won't be last. I think they'll at least get home for one game. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to host the East final again, or will they just get to the East semis. But I think they're definitely a team that's capable of finishing first or second in the East. I think if I had to pick losers, it's kind of or another loser, sort of the teams that haven't done much. Like I think Calgary and Montreal kind of stand out as the two where they haven't really done any major additions, especially because Calgary's came off kind of another mediocre season by their standards. It's interesting to see what they'll be like coming into this year and into the draft. And then I think if you talk winners, I think the two I've been most impressed by are in the East, the Ottawa Red Blacks, and in the West.
And how do you feel about Bo Levi Mitchell in his second year with Hamilton? And do you feel that Scott Malanovich, who obviously knows how to work with quarterbacks, he's won a Grey Cup with the Argonauts, how do you feel he'll work with Scott in Hamilton? And you think Bo will be a little more comfortable in Hamilton this year if he can stay healthy?
I mean, yeah, I think kind of like Masoli, the big question is he going to be able to stay healthy? And I mean, I look at I think you can draw comparisons with Milanovic when Ricky Ray came in the trade with Edmonton when he came in. But the difference there was Ricky Ray was he might not have been in his prime, but he was still a solid passer. I don't see Bo at the same quite level. I see Bo kind of more like Ricky.
I think we lost you there, Nick. Bear with us, guys. I think it's just a Wi-Fi issue with Nick. Nick was just talking about Bo Levi Mitchell. We were talking about.
Sorry, there.
You're back. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. I don't know where I got cut off, but like I see with regards to Bo Levi Mitchell, I don't see him to quite the same level as like Ricky Ray of 2012. I see him more like Ricky Ray of 2017. And that was with Mark Trestman. So I'm not quite sure you're going to have the same sort of if it's going to quite mesh up the same way as it did there. But I think was kind of a necessary move that Hamilton needed to do. They just needed a new face in the room, a different voice of perspective. So they'll definitely be a really interesting team to watch. And I know even though I'm a fan of their arch rivals, I'll definitely be watching their games fairly closely, especially at the beginning of the year, to kind of see how they shape up in the on the offensive side of things. I think defensively, they've straight improved, but it's really going to see if they're going to be able to have the offensive production, because they've kind of lacked it in crucial times last season.
Absolutely. And them bringing back Tim White, they brought him back, and then Godwin. So I do think they have the pieces in place to be good offensively, but I think it's just going to come down to can Bo Levi Mitchell stay healthy, and can they get production from the running back? And I believe they lost one of the running backs too. I'm not sure where he went to. Sean, I'm trying to think who the Cats running back was, but they lost him the free agency.
Oh, is it Butler?
No, it's the other guy. Sean, I can't remember his name. It's on the tip of my tongue, but they lost one of their key running backs to free agency. But we'll see what happens with the Tiger Cats. But I really think they're going to be in a very improved team, and I think it was time for our Orlando Steinhauer to step up. And I think Scott will give them a different approach. And I really think the Cats are going to be contenders in the East this year, along with the Argos and the Alouettes and Ottawa. I really think this Eastern Division is going to come down to the last week of the season to see who gets that number one seed in the East.
Yeah, well, we've been saying it for the last decade that, the East is finally looking like it's going to do better than the West, and then it doesn't happen. So it'll be I guess it's another one of those years, and we'll just have to wait and see and find out. The another one I'm kind of curious looking at is how Winnipeg's going to do, because like this is what, year 5 now of kind of coming in now. So as sort of the perennial top dog, but they only have 2 championships against Hamilton. So yeah, if the only team they can beat in the Grey Cup are the Tiger Cats, it's really interesting to see what that brings forth.
The thing is, they've gone to 4 straight Grey Cups. To me, that's a dynasty. But because they didn't win 3 or 4 in a row, you can't really call them a true dynasty. I would say they're almost a dynasty, and they're a tremendous organization. I still wouldn't count them out in the West. I really feel right now in the West, it's going to come down to BC and Winnipeg. And then I feel Edmonton, Saskatchewan, and Calgary are going to battle for 3, 4, and 5. And I really think Chris Jones, with the additions of Bethel Thompson, Gittins Jr., Javon Leake, Boris Beatty, I think the Elks are going to be an improved football club. And I'm being optimistic. I think Edmonton could finish 3rd in the West coming up in 2024.
Yeah, you gotta hope. Like, they're just Edmonton fans are just begging for some good on-field success with the years they've been having. Like, I made Saskatchewan seem bad, but it's way worse in Edmonton.
Well, I like some of their moves, and we'll see what happens there. Hey, Nick, you got a few more minutes. I wanted to ask you this question. Overall, how did you feel quarterback Chad Kelly played in his first full year as a starting quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts, and just thoughts on what happened in the East Final, and do we need to be worried about what happened there going into the 2024 season with Chad Kelly, and also maybe a little bit about Cameron Dukes and Brian Scott as well on the roster?
Yeah, I mean, 16-2 record. He played well. I mean, it's unfortunate that things kind of fell apart in that East Final, but he proved he had the ability to lead a team for the duration of a season. Made smart decisions, and I think losing his quarterback coach's mentor there, not being able to have him in that East Final, was, I think, what kind of caused things to fall apart. When you look at it coming into this season, the question coming in is how's he gonna be in camp, and how's he gonna be in sort of the preseason and into the regular season? Is it gonna be the Chad Kelly that we saw for those 16-2 season of regular season games, or is it going to be are those mistakes in the East Final going to eat him up? And is he going to continue to make mistakes in the preseason and into the start of the regular season? That's what I think's really, really kind of the big question mark coming in if we're just looking at quarterback. But I think it's good that the Argonauts have kept Dukes and Scott in. Dukes proved he had potential and could fill in that role against Winnipeg in that regular season game they played. I think it's they have that ability to build on what they had last year. I think we probably will see a little bit more of Dukes coming in because I think we want to see that improvement on sort of the bunch play formations and things like that. Hopefully Scott will get some more opportunities as well, but for third string especially, it's hard. But I think the fact that they've kept the core guys together, I think it's a good look in their locker room at quarterback right now, and I think it's better than making a change and getting someone in at this point, like getting someone like a third string from another team just to change the look. I don't think that's quite necessary here, but I think the thing that's kind of clear here though is that it's still Chad Kelly's office in Toronto at QB1.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting training camp as well. Hey, we have a viewer, Rod Peterson, the Hall of Fame broadcaster from Saskatchewan, is watching our show tonight, and you can check out Rod Peterson's shows weekdays from 12 to 2 on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM. And I'm hoping to get Rod back on our show at some point this year as well. Rod was a long-time play-by-play announcer for Saskatchewan Roughriders for 20 years, and he's a huge fan of the CFL as well.
Yeah. Hey, sorry I didn't get a chance to see you out there in Saskatchewan when I was out at the Briar. I was a little too shy to go up to any of the radio stations out there, and say hello. But yeah, they still got a treat in Saskatchewan this season. I think it's going to be a much more successful season for them just with Corey Mason, AJ Ouellette alone.
Absolutely. And Nick, as we wrap this show up in a couple of minutes, just quick thoughts on the CFL Combine. Did you see any of it? Who stood out? And what are your thoughts on the upcoming CFL draft on Tuesday, April 30th at 8 p.m.? And I believe it is on TSN.
Yep. Yeah, looking at the draft, I didn't end up watching a whole lot of it. Just with work, I got extremely busy, unfortunately. I didn't have as much time as I did last season to look into it. But I think it is a very exciting combine group of prospects coming into this year's draft. What I always like about the CFL draft is that it's a really tough balancing act on trying to find guys who you think are not going to be in the NFL, but you're also still trying to find the best talent you're available to get at your position. And do you take the risk and draft someone who might not end up playing for you, or do you get a guy who you know is already committed to playing in your organization? Some guys, I guess if I have to recognize some individuals, Luke Brubaker had a really good combine with he's a Wilfrid Laurier guy, so of course I'm going to plug him first. He was one of the highest scoring overall guys in the draft or in the combine. Michael Chris Ike from Delaware State, running back, tied for the 40-yard dash with Benjamin LaBrosse from McGill. So those are two individuals. Another guy who I saw was mentioned, got some kind of Jake Serezna comparisons, was Cincinnati's Joel DeBlanco. One guy I think will be interesting to see from Merrimack, Jack Zergiotis. Apologize if I mispronounce any names, but there's still potential even among the quarterback position that, as we kind of seen with Trey Ford and Nathan Rourke, the door I think is starting to open a little bit more for even quarterbacks to come in to the league. And like we talk ratio and stuff, and always there's a little part in the back of my mind that makes me wonder if they ever tweak the formula a little bit and say the quarterback either counts as a national or arguably replaces two nationals on offense. If you have a Canadian quarterback, could we see a little bit more homegrown talent in that kind of idle core position that most kids dream of playing when they're 8 or 9 years old. So I think it's overall, though, this draft is very deep. There's a lot of good talent kind of at all positions, and I think what makes the draft fun is that you're always looking for that guy who's going to break out and be a star, and it might not necessarily be some of these first round guys. And one of the things that Toronto has done is extremely well is they've drafted groups where we've seen more than a third of them play in the very same or the very next season, which you often don't see a lot. A lot of players hardly ever play for any long period of time, but we've seen pretty good success from the Toronto Argonauts draft board. And while I have no idea who they're looking at, there's someone they really want, because in part of that trade with Hamilton, they traded up in the draft. So there's definitely potential there that there's somebody that they have an eye on that they want to get.
That leads to my next question. In your opinion, Nick, as a Argonaut season ticket holder and CFL fan, where do you feel the needs are for the Toronto Argonauts they might be able to address in this upcoming 2024 draft?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I've seen in the past, we've seen a lot of line play, particularly from who the Argos have picked. I don't see line a big concern as much this year. For me, I think there's the potential they could get another maybe young Canadian wide receiver now that they traded Curly Gittins. I think there could be also another Canadian defensive back spot potential. I think those would probably be the two you could end up seeing. I think when we look at it sort of last year too, I look at someone like Ife Onyemaenem, who stayed at Laurier and played another year out there, but had some looks on special teams before. You could get someone like that where maybe you can afford to take a year to develop someone a little bit further. And then like questions on who's going to sort of fill in some of those positions too. Like, are we going to see, so like the linebacking position there, if Onyemaenem moves in, what does that mean for Brendan Calver, Jack Cassar, who have kind of been playing behind Jonathan Jones and Winnie McManus? How does sort of that play into things? So I think those are the kind of questions we're going to see going in. But if I had to kind of guess what they'd be looking at, probably a Canadian wide receiver or a defensive back would probably be my two thoughts. The other option is they could go with another fullback, maybe, because like Nichols, they drafted last year, they released him and then they re-signed him after training camp. So do you think there's maybe the potential to improve there? Do you get more of a power running back in sort of that tight end thing? Are we gonna see that with some of the coaching changes around, even though it's been on the defensive side, are we going to see a bit of a different look offensively now that Drew Tate is in as sort of a quarterback's coach? There's a lot of questions, but that's what makes CFL and the draft really exciting. And I always like telling people about that, because like what makes a really good offensive lineman does not make a good linebacker or a good defensive back. So to kind of see that there's totally so many different avenues they could go, and it'll be up to whatever pinball Ryan Dinwiddie and the folks in the Argos war room decide they need. But whoever they've got in mind, I think they're pretty certain already who they want, and because of that trade up with Hamilton.
And going to wrap this up with these questions, Nick. Thoughts on the overall direction of the Toronto Argonauts organization going into the 2024 season, obviously with their management team, coaching staff, and hopefully they can get that attendance to about 20,000 a game, because I thought the attendance at the East Finals the last 2 years has been outstanding, and it's just nice to see at least 20,000 in the stadium. And the other question is, what home games are you really looking forward to this? Which home games are you looking forward to the most this season at BMO Field, and finally having 9 home games again this year?
Yeah, it's definitely good that they're going back. They're not losing a game out east finally. I think then the two that I'm kind of looking forward to, funny enough, are against Western teams. Then I'm looking forward to to having Saskatchewan back in the building because the Rider fans travel well. Hopefully, I'll see some of them who I met at when I was out in Regina. If they want to make the trek over to Toronto, that would be cool. The other one I have circled on my calendar is the Edmonton game because of how many guys, McLeod, Curley, Javon, Boris, just to name a few, who are coming back to play in Toronto. I think it's going to be quite a special night and one to really enjoy and sort of reflect on for guys who played there last year. So I think those two are ones I have circled on my calendar. And then what was the other part of your question? I missed the first part. Sorry.
It's okay. The overall direction of this Toronto Argonauts franchise going into this season.
Yeah. I think, well, like I said, they're not going to be 16-2 again. I think that was like, we might not see that again by any CFL team for another 30 years. So it was a really special season from that standpoint. And I think that's where kind of fans have to understand that they won't be as dominant. And I think kind of knowing that there are going to be some painful losses this year, some more kind of growing pains. I think it's something you have to understand and accept. And I just hope we don't get into the toxic thing of we lost 3 games in a row. We got to fire the head coach. We got to fire the coordinator. We got to replace so-and-so at quarterback and flip the whole team around, trade everybody. Like we don't need to burn down the entire city because of a blip, a not so good season, because we have had some pretty good success the last 3 years, and yeah, I don't think it's going to be quite as dominant as it was, but there's still going to be a solid team, and they definitely have the ability to compete for that East final spot.
What are you looking forward to most about the Argonauts training camp at the University of Guelph coming up in May?
I think the fact with how the winter's kind of been and going to Regina, I think with everything, it's just going to be going to camp, having my clipboard out, having the roster list, and just having that time to relax and just soak in that football's back after a 4-long break. I've noticed now as I've gotten older how long these breaks really are, and how boring things can be sometimes without a little bit of football. And going out to University of Guelph, beautiful facility there. I heard you told me earlier they got some renovations there in store, so it's going to be an improved facility. And
a new turf and a new scoreboard, a video scoreboard, as well as a new turf.
Yeah, it should be really exciting. So I'm really looking forward to that, and just being back in the sun, and it's going to start feeling warm again, and it'll feel like football season once again.
Yeah, I'm already excited for their first preseason game here at the University of Guelph on May 31st against Hamilton, and then the home opener, I guess, is what, Sunday, June 9th against the BC at BMO Field.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, should be good. It'll finally start to feel like football season real soon.
Finally, Nick, where can my audience follow you on social media?
Yep, as always, you can give me a follow on Twitter or X at Nick_small_38. You might also find me on Facebook if you look me up, but I don't tend to go on that quite as much. So yeah, if you ever want to chat football or curling, just send me a tweet, or I keep my DMs open if there's anything you want to talk to in not in the public realm. And yeah, I'm always thankful for being able to spend some time with you, Chris, and getting to talk Argonauts football. I'm honored that I got to be your first guest of the new season. Congratulations on that. Season 8, right?
Season 8, episode 1, overall 386 of Live with CDP Sports Talk.
Yeah, you've come a long way, my friend, and you've got some pretty fantastic guests. I'm looking forward to seeing you get a couple more CFL guys on. I'm sure Mike Hogan will come on, maybe Paul Woods or somebody like that. There's lots of amazing people in the CFL community, and that's the one thing I really enjoy. Sort of like curling, the community around football fans. Like, yeah, you've got the rivalry, Argos, Ticats, but the camaraderie. I have plenty of friends who are Cat fans, so it's that part of the sport kind of unites us more than it divides us by our rivalries.
And I'm looking forward to doing year 2 of the Argo Bounce live audio show with you, Nick, during the CFL and Argonaut season. And I'm looking forward to that and getting some more great guests as well.
Yes, like yourself, I'm adjusting to this kind of social media sort of podcast live stream lifestyle, and it's really cool to be recognized by people when they come up to you and, hey Nick, it's good seeing you. I love your takes on this and that. So I've always try to drive positive energy, so I'm really excited for that. So and thankful for it. So I'm looking forward to another year of covering the Argos, and now that we've gotten a full season under our belt, and we're kind of rolling more and more into it, it's cool kind of looking back on what we talked about in the earlier shows and what we kind of got right and what we maybe not so much.
And our show will be on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM and also now on CKRT Border City Radio in Windsor, Ontario as well. So I'm excited to have another radio station for our show, and I'm hoping we can start up our show maybe in the next month or so before training camp starts, and looking forward to another exciting 2024 CFL season, and looking forward to being back at BMO Field this summer as media and also as a season ticket holder. And Nick, I want to say thank you so much for coming on here tonight. My first CFL show of the 2024, and I couldn't find anybody better to have on than yourself.
You're just saying that. Thank you. And yeah, thanks for everybody who's tuned in. Congratulations on having 2 wonderful radio stations now to broadcast our interview. And I'm looking forward to doing the Argos Bounce with you very soon, and maybe reflecting on how the draft goes at the end of April.
Say hi to your family for me, and we'll definitely see you soon, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Chris. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
You too. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed season 8. That's hard to believe. Season 8, episode 1 of Live with CDP Sports Talk, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership here in Guelph tonight. That was my guest, Nick Small. He is a friend of mine, but he's also the co-host of the Argo Bounce live audio show that we do during the CFL and Argonaut season. And he's also a huge curling fan, and he loves the CFL. So please check out Nick Small on his Twitter X page. I have it on here on the graphics at Nick_Small_38. And just looking forward to the 2024 CFL season and the 2024 Toronto Argonauts, and see if they can rebound from last year's disappointing loss to the Montreal Alouettes in the East Final. And the Montreal Alouettes are the defending Grey Cup champions, and it's going to be an interesting season as well. And the 111th Grey Cup this year will be played at BC Place in Vancouver, British Columbia on Sunday, November 17th, 2024. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes out of the East this year and who comes out of the West for the 111th Grey Cup at BC Place in Vancouver. As well, guys, before we wrap this up, I'm going to show you a little bit of a clip from the CFL's YouTube channel with Marshall Ferguson and Dwayne Ford discussing the recent CFL combine that took place in Winnipeg. All right, guys, that clip was courtesy of the Canadian Football League's YouTube channel. And again, the CFL draft, the 2024 CFL draft, Tuesday, April 30th at 8 p.m. And those highlights were from the CFL Combine a couple weeks ago in Winnipeg as well. And it's going to be an interesting draft. And we'll see what happens there as well. And thanks to the CFL and Marshall Ferguson and Dwayne's Ford for that YouTube clip as well. Also, guys, next live with CDP Sports Talk, sponsored by BarryCullen.com, Monday, April 8th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, with my special guest, Barry Davis. He was a former Sportsnet Phil reporter with the Toronto Blue Jays, and he's currently now a sales and leasing consultant with Bolton Honda. Barry's going to come on, and we're going to talk about the 2024 Toronto Blue Jays, who are off to a 3-4 start, the renovations to the Rogers Center, and maybe a little bit about the latest at Bolton Honda. And also, he's the lead singer for the Tom Petty tribute band as well, if you didn't know that about Barry Davis. So please check out Season 8, Episode 2, again, this Monday, April 8th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern with Barry Davis, as we're going to talk some Toronto Blue Jays and some Bolton Honda cars, and a little bit about his latest with the Tom Petty tribute band as well. So I'm looking forward to that as well. As always, guys, just to let you know, I'm a volunteer, and please check out, if you're looking for a forever friend, a furry friend, check out the Cambridge and District Humane Society, 1650 Dunbar Road in Cambridge, Ontario. You can call them at 519-623-7722, or you can visit their website at cambridgehumanesociety.org. And right now, if you go on their website, they are doing a monthly raffle, a 50-50 raffle in support of the Cambridge District Humane Society. And you can get those tickets again on cambridgehumanesociety.org as well. And I enjoyed my day today there walking Clifford and Alpine, two wonderful dogs that are up for adoption there. And you can see their profile and information again on cambridgehumanesociety.org. Finally, guys, just to let you know, Live with CDP Sports Talk is a weekly sports and entertainment talk show hosted by yours truly, Chris Pomay, is on weeknights from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM, The Key, the home of Southern sports and talk, the heartbeat of Atlanta. And I'm also on weeknights from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. on radio station CKRT, Border City Radio in Windsor, weeknights from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And on the radio station's website is ckrtbordercityradio.com as well. And I will put that here on the ticker. And they do play the best soft rock music from the 70s, 80s, and 90s as well. Live with CDP Sports Talk is live streamed on these platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter /X, I call it, Twitch, LinkedIn, and now available on Instagram if you follow me there at Chris Pomay on Instagram. Also, you can check out my website and all my digital media work and all my social media websites and previous radio shows on beacons.ai/Chris Pomay. That's beacons.ai/Chris D. Pomay. Live with CDP Sports Talk, again, is sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, or give them a call at 519-824-0210, or email them at info@barrycullen.com. Speaking of Barry Cullen Chevrolet, check out the refreshed 2024 Trailblazer, 5.49% financing for up to 84 months. Eligible Costco members can receive a Costco gift card up to $750 bonus on select SUVs. More details at barrycullen.com. I am also a content creator. You can follow me on TikTok at Live with CDP. You can check out all my media work and some of my reels from my shows on TikTok at Live with CDP. And I want to say thank you to my 2,000 plus followers there as well. And also, guys, if you already haven't, check out my YouTube channel, Chris Pomay, Live with CDP Sports Talk, and remember to hit that subscribe notification. And I want to say thank you to all my subscribers on my YouTube channel. And also, guys, I'm also on Cameo. Type in Chris Pomay on cameo.com. And if you're looking for a birthday wish, pep talk, want to talk sports with me or ask me a question, book your Cameo with me today on cameo.com. StreamYard is the official live stream provider of Live with CDP Sports Talk. If you're into webinars or podcasting such as yours truly, check out StreamYard.com. They do have basic free plans, or they have plans like I have, the professional plan, $49 a month US. Or if you're a business, they do have business plans specific for your business on StreamYard.com, and contact the sales department there as well. And I've been using StreamYard now for 3.5 years, and to me, it's the #1 live streaming service out there. Live with CDP Sports Talk, the audio version is available on these platforms: iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify for podcasters, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Spotify, Castbox, LinkedIn, Pandora, and Tuned In. Finally, you can email or text Live with CDP Sports Talk at cpomay19@gmail.com, or you can text the show at 519-820-7188. Any comments, questions, suggestions, feedback would be greatly appreciated. And I want to say thank you to my guest, Nick Small, for coming on here tonight. And he will be rejoining me for season 2 of the Argo Bounce live audio show, talking Argonauts football and the Canadian Football League, starting up probably in the beginning of May. And I'm excited to have Nick back on. Nick is a huge Argonaut fan, CFL fan, and very passionate about football in general. And again, also, some news today: the Detroit Tigers actually lost the game after winning game 1 of the doubleheader against the Mets today, 6-3. Unfortunately, in game 2, the bullpen for the Tigers let them down. They were up 1-0 going to the bottom of the ninth, and unfortunately, the Mets pulled out the win. The Mets won, I think, what was it? I can't remember the score, but the Mets won. What was it? 4-3, I believe the Mets won. The Mets won. So unfortunately, the Tigers couldn't get it done today. Actually, 2-1. The final was 2-1 for the Mets. They scored the winning run in the bottom of the ninth inning. So the Mets were coming into this game 0-5. They were desperate for a win. And hey, credit to the Detroit Tigers. Their starting pitcher and bullpen has been outstanding for the first 6 games on the road. Going 5-1 is a great start. And the Tigers are now back home at Comerica Park for their home opener against the Oakland Athletics tomorrow afternoon at Comerica Park. Looking forward to that as well. I want to again say thank you to Nick Small for coming on here, and thank you to WQEE 99.1 FM and CKRT Border City Radio in Windsor, and Barry Cullen Chevrolet for sponsoring Live with CDP Sports Talk. I hope everybody has a great night, and also enjoy the NBA games, all the Major League Baseball games this weekend, and the NCAA Final Four is this Saturday night as well. I'm going to be cheering for the underdogs, NC State, who haven't been this far since 1983. But anyways, guys, I hope you have a great night. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you back here for Season 8, Episode 2 of Live with CDP Sports Talk, Monday, April 8th at a special time of 8:30 p.m. Eastern with Barry Davis, and we're going to be talking a little Toronto Blue Jays baseball. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and thanks for watching and listening to Live with CDP Sports Talk.